when I met up with Eleanor a couple of weeks ago to plan this event, we talked about various titles here. What does a lawyer say? The most unpopular guy in the room. And Paul talked earlier about the light side and the dark side, and heaven knows where the legal profession fits into that kind of spectrum. We talked about titles for the talk, and one of the titles that we came up with was actually bloody lawyers, because that's the experience that we quite often have. You come into a negotiation late, and you're perceived as holding things up or causing delay. But I wanted to talk, instead of bloody lawyers, I wanted to talk about have your people talk to my people. Now, have your people talk to my people is something that a client of mine used to say. Actually, the first client I advised back in 1991. Let's call him Adam. And Adam was a really bright guy. Really bright guy. He had a degree in computer science. He had a postgrad thing in psychology of visual perception. And Adam was working on something which is now completely commonplace, but in those days was totally cutting edge. It was science fiction. We were talking about 3D TV. And Adam had a startup that basically consisted of himself and a workbench and a PC. So he'd do presentations to prospective customers or investors, and at the end of it, if they showed any interest at all, he'd go, great, have your people talk to my people. And he didn't have any people. All he had was me on the end of the phone saying, what do I do now? Yeah, that's sort of quite interesting. I don't know actually yet whether this guy was a con man or a genius. I fell out with him. I fell out of touch with him about 20 years ago. But I did see one of these demos being inflicted on a prospective customer. So what you've got to imagine is his studio, and it's dark, and the customer is there with a pair of glasses on like this, and a sort of helmet array, which has got wires going into a machine down here, and it's full of batteries, and it's obviously causing this guy's neck to twist a little bit. And the demonstration, when you went through it, lasted about 2 hours, and it consisted of peering at a tiny TV screen. And there was a video playing on a continuous loop, which had been through the algorithm that converted a 2D to a 3D video effect. So you'd be standing in the dark looking at this, and Adam would be standing behind you going, can you see it yet? Can you see it yet? It was like the Emperor's New Clothes, because if you said, no, I can't see it, he'd go, well, no, some people can't see it. Give it another 10 or 15 minutes. And what would happen was that customers would go out of there with a blinding headache, having said, yes, yes, I can see it, just to be able to get out of the room. What's this got to do with sourcing? It seems to me that have your people talk to my people is still something that we come across quite a lot when we're called in as legal advisors to comment on a contract or to help get a contract signed. There are lots of bits of paperwork that our clients, not so much the in-house lawyers, the general counsel and the legal directors, but the IT service guys and the IT directors and the CIOs, lots of bits of the legal paperwork that people do not want to bother reading. Oh, it's the warranties and the liability clause, the termination arrangements, the IPR stuff. It's so boring. And I quite often get asked, Jeremy, why don't you just call up the other side and sort it out with them, sort of lawyer to lawyer, this is all lawyer stuff. And the answer is, well, of course, no, I can't do that. It's not really just lawyer stuff. Boring as it is, impenetrable and Dickensian, as the language sometimes says, you've got to understand this stuff. All the legal stuff is important to the commercial deal. The IPR clause matters because it goes to the question of your rights in the system, your usage of it. The liability clause matters because it goes to the question of what you're going to get back if the thing goes catastrophically wrong and you end up in court. So yes, I can go and negotiate these things without sitting next to you in the room, but it won't be very productive because frankly I'll just have to come back to you after my meeting with the other side and say, look, I've been through all this, how does this sound? And we go into a sort of loop like that. So it's actually not very productive. I need to be alongside you. That idea of leaving it to the lawyers is actually the flip side of something else that quite often happens, which is when clients say to me, Jeremy, look, you don't need to look at the commercial stuff, you don't need to look at the SLA, it's all very technical, you probably won't understand it, the charging arrangement's all commercial. You know, you don't need to look at that, it's business, you just do the legal stuff. So, let me let you know a secret. SRA. Most lawyers don't know a whole lot of law. So yeah, we all did law at university and we all know about wills and conveyancing and what personal injury law was like 20 years ago. But the truth is, to be a successful commercial contract lawyer, IT lawyer, you need to know a bit of contract law, a bit of copyright law, a bit of data protection, some HR and TUPE stuff. You don't need to know a huge mountain of any of those things. So, if we don't do law, the question then becomes, what do we do? Now, when my two big girls, teenage girls now, when they were little, they used to ask me, what do you do, Daddy? You leave the house early in the morning, come back late at night. You know, what do you do? And I tried to explain what being a business lawyer was. And the best explanation I could come up with was this. I help people write things. There's a thing called a contract, where one person makes a promise to another person, and that person makes a promise back in return. And sometimes people get a bit muddled about what those promises are and what they mean, so I sit down with them and I help, because I'm quite good at writing stuff. I sit down with them and I help them to spell it out as clearly as it can possibly be. And that's what I told my daughters when they were 6, 9 years old. And I still think that's actually the best explanation of what we do as business lawyers. You see, the reason why IT and outsourcing projects quite often go off the rails is 9 times out of 10 because the service description was vague, or the scope of work didn't make sense, or there were ambiguities in the project plan, or there was a disconnect between the SLA and the service credit regime, or there was, these are all business and technical areas where it goes wrong. The reason IT or an outsourcing project goes wrong is very seldom because the liability clause wasn't very good or the warranties were a bit unclear. It never goes wrong because of the legal T's and C's. The legal T's and C's are there as a kind of safety net if it does. And that's what we really spend our time doing. I would say that on an average outsourcing project, we probably spend 25% of our time looking at the T's and C's and negotiating IPR clauses and liability limits and that sort of stuff, and 75% grinding through service description, SLA, charging arrangements, governance regime, and all that kind of stuff. Now, as legal advisors, we can't write that content for you. That all has to come from you originally. But what we can do is to look at it critically and to help shape it and structure it and challenge it, bring clarity to it, to make sure that if you ever do need to rely on that, it's clear and it's accurate and it's precise and people have thought about it. Furthermore, I think that very process, that rigorous process of critically looking at the paperwork will actually make a better project and will minimise, or at least reduce, the risk of ending up in court and having to then look at the T's and C's and the warranties and liability clause. We spend a lot of time, like I say, worrying about these bits of paperwork, because if the project is going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong there. And that's why I think this idea of having your people talk to my people is actually positively dangerous. I need you alongside me so that I can advise you about the legal bits, about the liabilities and warranties. You need me alongside you so that I can help you structure and shape the detailed technical and commercial language of the document. So I'm not here to apologise to the whole legal profession. I wish I could stand here and say that we're all outstandingly brilliant, honest, efficient, collaborative. I mean, it's not true. It's not true for the legal profession any more than it's true for IT managers or procurement consultants or anything else. I use legal advice myself for wills and conveyancing and that kind of thing, and I know just how depressing it is when you get a 4-page long letter of advice with no paragraph subheadings. And I'm a lawyer, I read this stuff 3 times and I say, I do not understand it. And I call up the advisor and say, I don't get it, can you just tell me what you want? Which I know you guys do as well. So, there's no excuse for it. If your lawyer doesn't write clearly in the way that you want, get a new lawyer. If your lawyer doesn't offer great service and value for money, get a new lawyer. It's really quite simple. We're in the service industry just like everybody else. One of the clients I work for said to me after a long negotiation meeting, you know what you're great at, Jen, what you're really good at is spotting ambiguity. And I think that's what most of us do. What keeps lawyers awake more than anything else is a lack of clarity. And very often, we're the only ones around that negotiating table with 15 or 20 people sitting around it from technical, finance, commercial, and everything else. We're the only ones who will say, I'm sorry, I don't get it, because people don't want to appear disruptive or people are fearful of looking stupid. And lawyers, as I say to my associates, lawyers sometimes who just have to not be afraid of looking stupid and saying, I don't get it. And that's why the legal advisor needs proper input from the client. Anyway, I hope that's an informative, if brief, look at the way that lawyers think. If you like what I say, I can give you a card, or you can look at or you can have your people call my people.